Welcome back to another Stampede Blue Colts cast. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm your host, Matt Danley. Thank you guys for joining me here once again. Wanted to start the show with my thanks and appreciations as opposed to doing it at the end of the show, because I fear that maybe some of you guys aren't hearing it, but I appreciate all of you guys. Please go to iTunes, Apple Podcasts, whatever it is, and give us a rating and review if you guys are loving the show. Thank you guys also for the subscriptions here on YouTube. They've been fantastic. Also, the shows have been great for the podcast itself, the audio, just the audio. Wanted to just give you guys a much needed thank you for everything that you guys have been doing for the show, for the website, everything involved. It has been fantastic, and just really can't thank you guys enough for it. So let's jump into today what we got going on. Not a lot in terms of news or anything like that. We're looking forward to some news, and we'll get to that here in just a minute. But really, the big thing that's going on right now is that the Colts are kicking off OTAs tomorrow or today, depending on when you are listening to this or watching this or whatever. But Tuesday, the Colts kick off their first day of their 10 days allotted by the NFL for their OTAs. What are we to expect from that? Well, we can't, I don't know how much everybody's there always seems to be something different between mini camp, OTAs, rookie mini camp, all that other stuff. There seems to be rules involving all that stuff that kind of gets muddying the waters and such like that. But really, for OTAs, there's just not a lot expected as far as a competition type deal in camp. This isn't a training camp type thing. But basically what they do is they're going to be able to do 7-on-7 drills, 9-on-7, 11-on-11. They're able to wear their helmets. They're not able to wear pads. They're not able to have any full contact. And basically it's kind of like a tight roping effect here. They're allowed to go against each other at this point as far as in camp and or in practicing and stuff like that. But they're not able to really, basically any of the contact has to be incidental. They're going to run their routes. The defense is going to try to pick off passes. The linebackers are going to try and plug the holes or just whatever they're going to be doing. Everybody's going to be trying to go at that 3/4 speed, basically understanding that you can't have any collisions. So it's that mixed in with basically everything else that we normally see from a training camp practice. They're going to go into special teams kick off the day more than likely, as they normally do. They're going to get into their position groups. They're going to go through drills. They're going to do a lot of technique work. And that's one of the things that really is one of the hidden values, I guess you could say, of what minicamp or OTAs actually is. I mean, if I own a little bit, other than like going through position drills, doing the 7-on-7 stuff, really just kind of trying to get themselves back in. I mean, if you played football in high school or even college for that matter, you have the summer basically 3-a-days. At least they did when I played. That's to show you how long ago it was. So and what they did there is you just keep focusing on what you need to do as a position to get everybody back into football shape. All the conditioning and strength and conditioning type issues that they want to get worked out, find out who's injured, all that good stuff. But basically, aside from the no contact or the incidental contact only, the only thing that they're going to be doing is basically what they do at a training camp practice. Now, there's not going to be probably a ton of media on like probably Tuesday and Thursday, because that's the first few days of it. I mean, they have the practices the 22nd, 3rd, and 4th. The 23rd, they're apparently going to be able to get a lot of what word am I looking for? A lot of access to not only the practice, but they're going to be getting to talk to Reich, I guess, as well. So that'll be cool. Then the Colts will come back May 30th through June 1st. That's 3 more days. And then June 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th will wrap up OTAs for the Colts. That's 10 days. That's what everybody gets. And they're doing it in 3 little sections here. So like I said, these portions of the day that are most lively are going to be the 7-on-7, the offense and defense against each other, which is fun. to watch in training camp, and I can imagine it's going to be kind of interesting as well through this. But I mean, there's a lot of rookies, a lot of new faces, the new coaching staff. Let's go through kind of what they want from OTAs. Now, you're not going to get all news, right? I mean, from it, you're gonna hear some things. Well, so and so looked good breaking on a ball, or so and so looked good, tracking a ball deep, or maybe Brissett looks really good throwing the ball, or just something like that, or somebody looks really explosive and quick. Those things come out. But as far as what we're going to see depth chart wise, not a lot of that's going to be coming out, or even you shouldn't even expect to hear it. I mean, if you do, take it with a really big grain of salt, because it just doesn't mean a whole lot. There was last year one thing that did kind of pop out of it that stayed the same, that was kind of an just not something that we expected to see. It was kind of a surprise, but it was Matthias Farley getting the starting spot right off the jump over TJ Green. Almost certain that was in OTAs. It may have been actually in their mini camp, but stuff like that happens, that you just see them working with the first group. It doesn't mean a whole lot, but some of that stuff does carry over into mini camp, then into actual training camp later on in the summer. So like I said, what they're wanting to see, let's go through this real quick. They're wanting to see the technique. They're wanting to see offensive linemen, defensive linemen really honing and practicing their technique, trying to get themselves really figured out as far as everything that they can do mechanically. You can do power later on. You can find what pass rusher has a nice rip move or whatever, but they're just using tackling dummies. You can see who looks good in coverage, but again, 3/4 speed for the most part, a lot of it. And then, I mean, they'll speed it up on some of the offense, the one-to-one drills and such, but you really can't get a great idea about this because it's just not live. They know a lot of what's going on, otherwise they wouldn't, even have the guys on the team. So they're also going to be installing a bunch, probably not a bunch, but a good portion of what they really want this team to have set for themselves in minicamp with the playbook install. So this is going to be something totally new for just about everybody on both sides of the ball. It's going to be interesting and fun to hear who the coaches are talking about. Not so much of what we hear about who played well or who did this, because we just don't know. A guy may pick a ball off, but we don't know if he was actually in the right spot. He could have been in the totally wrong spot. It just looks good because he got an interception, or so-and-so threw a good pass, but the receiver didn't run the right route, or he didn't throw it to the right read or something. A lot of that stuff we can't possibly know just looking and watching and reading what we hear, or hearing what we hear as far as how individuals played. So a lot of it is the playbook install. Like I said, on both sides, they're going to be installing this cover 2, Tampa 2 type defense. I am interested to see, I guess you could say, who they start with their first group in this. Now, I think everybody should be interested in this, because they're not putting it out on a plate saying, this is our starting group. What they are doing is they're saying, I think that's probably one of 2 people who are probably going to start at this position. Let's put them there. So you're basically seeing the first couple guys, whether it be the first group or the second group. In the first group, you're going to see at least one of the guys at that position that they kind of expect to be the starter. Not necessarily the guy, but it's going to be within a couple guys. And that's something that they want to do. They want to just drop a guy out there, let the guys that are going to be competing for that starting spot understand that this guy here is kind of at the top. Whether he's the guy or the next guy, he's kind of at the top. That's at least one of the guys you have to beat out. It's kind of just an initial notice of competition, I suppose you could say, for these guys. So what they're going to be doing is they're going to be installing these playbooks. They're going to put out base defense guys within 1 or 2 of the depth chart. And they're going to also, like I said, do a lot of the strength and conditioning stuff. They're going to be, basically working with these rookies a lot to kind of see how they have matched up and sped their game up from college. This isn't the same kind of football that they've played. and they know that. It can be, somewhat of a rough adjustment, I would assume, for a lot of these guys, because I mean, not only is the speed of the game completely different and just on a whole nother level, but a lot of these guys, even though they've been in some of this defense or they've been in a similar offense, some of it's new terminology. It's definitely new players around them. And they're definitely having to learn the intricacies of what either coaching staff wants from that group. So there's a lot going on for rookies, especially. But I mean, there's just so many different things that these guys can do without the collisions, the contact. Is it I don't know. It's not something it's such a fine line right here, because right, I mean, everybody gets excited because they're doing something, but then you kind of tried to hold your excitement back because you realize that it's just OTAs. There's nothing to it. But there is something to it. There's going to be a lot of what the coaching staff goes into the next stage, because I mean, look, once they get these 10 practices in, they go straight on to the next thing, which is, just mini camp, right? Now, how do they going to be doing this? And mandatory mini camp is in mid-June, and they're going to be getting all of these things figured out. I mean, it just is exciting, because what do we get from the next group? We don't know that. They don't really know that. But there is going to be some things going on to where some guys are going to kind of pop to the next level. Some guys are going to fall. And that is going to be something that we'll probably see not so much with what we are hearing from people who are in attendance or the coaching staff. We're going to see that in cuts, releases, signings of sorts, and everything else. So a lot of that's going to come to the surface then, and we won't probably hear about much of it. We're just going to see the results of it. So-and-so doesn't make it, to this point, and he gets cut and somebody else gets signed. That pretty much tells you that they didn't have a spot for him. Or something along those lines. So interesting for OTAs to get started. Kind of excited. I think that it's something that we can kind of all, kind of cling to, because we're just so close, it feels like, to actual training camp. Everything's about to get underway. But that's just about it. I'm wanting to see who they're loving. I mean, we know that they like Nyheim Hines. I want to hear something about this receiving group. I want to hear who looks good running their routes. I want to see who they're talking about has really good, because it's a different defense, guys. This isn't, not only that, but I think we're actually going to find out more from this OTA than we would from, let's say, in years past, because of look at the defensive scheme in general, and look at some of the most important parts as well. The cornerback position. Cornerback position was press man, right? In the past, predominantly anyways. Now it's off coverage, off man coverage, cover two, that Tampa 2 look where the linebacker has to drop to the middle third of the field. Those are those three things right there. Not just the cornerbacks, but the middle linebacker position, what they are really liking with that. Is it a guy like Franklin? Is it a guy like Adams? Is it a guy, like Sky Moore? They've been loving him. This is kind of one of those things where those guys can really put themselves out there. They got to show the speed, because ultimately that middle linebacker, and this still Najee Good, I mean, they're going to be a lot, I think, learned just in raw technical ability from the middle linebacker group, especially, but cornerbacks as well. They want to see who can break on the ball. They want to see who can click and close. They want to see who's going to be able to have recovery speed on the back end there. That's important. The middle linebacker, they basically have to be able to run like a safety, right, to play that Tampa 2, because they're dropping so deep. They're going to be responsible for slot receivers, tight ends. They're going to be, coming across the middle up the seam. They're going to be responsible for a lot. So that that middle linebacker is going to be, that Mike is going to be super important moving forward. They're going to be testing a lot of that. I think that's going to be one of the more hotly contested positions, to be quite honest with you. And really what I think they're going to do is, just because some of the positions there between the Sam, the Mike, and the Will, they're not interchangeable necessarily, but there are guys who can fit in more than one of those roles. I think that when it comes down to it, they're just going to take the best three linebackers of the group, and hopefully they fit their scheme. If not, they're going to look to the next guy and hope that he fits. And I just think that they're going to be looking really on talent and ability to react and read and to cover the ball or to cover the receivers and to have ball skills. And that speed's going to come from Darius Leonard. They're going to look really hotly at Sky Moore. I think he's going to get a ton of reps in this, and it's going to be interesting in some of those situations. I don't know what they can get too much out of the defensive line. Basically, it's all technique work with them. Same with offensive line, but running backs, wide receivers, they want to see, can Marlon Mack catch out of the backfield this year? Can Nyheim Hines, be explosive one cut and, can he dust people, or is he just running and really fast, but not, running away from anybody? They're going to want to see just some of those simple technicalities of what these guys are going to offer the team, the roster in the future. So I think a lot of that is going to be interesting and to hear about, to watch. But this year, especially, I think is going to be a little different because a lot of the schemes around what they're doing is different, and they need to find those guys. They don't have a stud middle linebacker. They don't really, truly have a number one corner, right? Quincy Wilson's good. Pierre Deser's good. I mean, are those two guys a number one corner on any other team? I don't think so. I mean, not yet, right? They may have a great year. That's not what I'm getting at. I'm not saying they don't have the potential to be. What I'm saying is we don't know that. We don't know. We can't possibly know that right now. They haven't done enough. So, the safety group's going to be kind of interesting too. And speaking of Farley, earlier, Farley's one of the more underrated guys on this roster, guys. He was sixth in tackles from the safety position last year in the NFL. Only had 2 interceptions, but Farley's a guy who can really challenge for some playing time. Gethers is there. Don't be surprised if Gethers and Farley are somewhat interchangeable. TJ Green, I still at this time, I don't know how much he offers. I mean, they're saying that, this is kind of built for him, but I don't know. I don't see that. He's definitely got the speed. He's got the athleticism. He's got the ability to rush off the edge. I just don't know how much of that's going to be really needed from him, to be quite honest with you. Obviously, they've got Malik Hooker, who can, patrol the middle of the field. He's a guy who would be even more effective, I think, in a cover two. Now, a lot of people don't think that he's really made for a cover two of any sort, or even this Tampa 2, which is really different. I mean, it is different, but it's virtually the same as just a base cover 2. But the thing about Hooker is, I mean, you're saying that he can control the middle of the field, which means he can go sideline to sideline, when the ball's in the air. How much more effective ball skills wise can he be if he's only got half the field to use or to work with or whatever? I think that's going to be something interesting. I think we're going to have a good time trying to figure all that out as it comes through. So, guys, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to come back and we're going to talk about the Colts roster and where they've improved the most in the offseason. Now, this is going to require a little bit of conversation, but I think that I've kind of got it nailed down here. And you guys be the judge, of course, but we'll talk about that right after this break. All right, guys, welcome back to the Colts cast. Let's talk about where the Colts improved the most this offseason. Let's look at the cornerback position. We've done this kind of before a little bit earlier, but it was basically just a run through of each position. I want to talk about how they've improved. The cornerback position still got Deser, a lot of undrafted guys that we don't know anything about. Harrison's still there. Milton, Moore, DJ White, Quincy Wilson, and that's it. Can we say that they improved? No, we can't. I mean, the cornerback position has not improved, right? Not because I don't think that they have the ability to be a good unit, but because they didn't do anything. They didn't make any moves. There's nothing there that jumps out at anybody. Now, once we see a little bit more of these guys, when they're allowed to hit, they're allowed to really truly play, maybe then we'll know. But right now, we can't possibly say that the cornerback group was among the tops in getting better this year. I'm going to try to split this up into positions as far as their front seven goes, but really look, I mean, at the defensive line, I guess, as a whole. Okay. A lot of this is position change. So you can't, when we look at defensive ends, for example, we're not looking at defensive ends who have always been defensive ends for the Colts. Last year, a handful of them were outside linebackers. So it's a different position for them. And we're going to have to push them all into their new positions the best we can, because, that's just the way that we're going to have to go through this. But they did sign Danico Autry, as a defensive end. I think that a lot of people are suggesting that he's probably going to be a guy who's going to kick inside more. He may be there in some other downs. I think he's going to be a rotational guy. I think when we watched his tape, he had really, really good, solid hand usage. I mean, really impressive, actually. Marcus Hunt, where's he going to be? Is he going to be defensive end, defensive tackle? We don't really know. I thought last year he did a really good job of getting into the backfield. Why not use him at defensive tackle again? I think that they kind of used him as a 3-4 defensive end, but if you're doing that, and it's a one gap scheme now, why aren't we, just letting him do what he did last year? Just if he's going to be in there at all, just get him in there and let him kind of penetrate the pocket from the interior. I just don't see that he's definitely not an edge rusher. He's definitely not a guy who's going to be able to take a tackle one-on-one. I just don't think. I mean, maybe you sit him out further out, towards a 3 tech if you get it, or even a 5 tech if you get him into some sort of a wide 9 situation with that front 4. I just don't see that he really has much of a future off the edge as a defensive end. He's got to be defensive tackle. Anthony Johnson, we don't know a lot about him. Tyquan Lewis, he's a guy who's going to play both. He's going to be an edge rusher. He's going to be an interior rusher. I think he's perfectly served as a defensive end. So we've got Autry and Lewis right now, and Johnson. Chris McCain, lightning in a bottle there off the edge. Very light, though. That's going to be he's pigeonholed into that, situation. He is 6'5", though. He's long. He's got strong hands, quick hands and solid technique. But he's a guy who can really kind of wreak havoc as a speed rusher. And that's, I think, what he's probably going to be used as. I think they're going to have him bulk up a little bit. And I don't mean like bulk-wise. I just mean they're going to want him to gain 5, 6, 8 more pounds, I think. I really, truly do. He's got enough speed where it's not going to hurt anything that he's doing. And he's the guy who is going to be, like I said, specifically a speed rusher. And they're going to want a guy who can at least play occasionally outside of that. Nunes Roches, defensive tackle. We're going to skip on him. Kamiko Toure, defensive end. I think primarily they're talking about wanting to maybe kick him inside. I think he's a defensive end as well. So right now, currently, defensive end wise, we've got Autry, Johnson, Lewis McCain, and Toure. So those 4 right there. It's a whole new group up there right now, right? None of those guys played last year in Indy. Let's move on. The rest of the defensive tackles, I think that probably some of the guys on the inside here are going to have a little bit more issues. Okay, so I think that those defensive ends, especially when you look at guys who like Terrell Basham, Jabal Shear, John Simon, those guys are all defensive ends now, not linebackers. So I think that unit as a defensive end, I think when you look edge rusher wise, what the Colts have, they've got some nice depth there. I think that's a solid position change. I don't know that it's massive. I don't think it's the best. I don't think it's where the Colts have improved the most. Looking at defensive tackle, okay, we're going to put Marcus Hunt in there. We're going to put Nunes Roches in there. We're also going to put Tomasi Lualilie. He's an interesting guy, I think, really fast, who had a really athletic profile. Cron Reed and Hassan Ridgeway and Grover Stewart. A lot of that, in my opinion, isn't really upgrade. I don't think there's much of an upgrade from the interior defensive linemen that they've got. Does Ridgeway improve? Does Stewart vastly improve? If Stewart has a phenomenal camp and a phenomenal year, he could be a real piece for the Colts moving forward. He's huge. He's definitely the heaviest lineman that the Colts have. But remember, they really liked his explosion. They really, really liked his explosion last year. Do they want him to cut some weight? Maybe he has, maybe he hasn't, but he's the big guy in the room. And, I mean, Ridgeway's a little lighter, but Grover's definitely the biggest guy right there, aside from Al Woods. Al Woods is the other defensive tackle who's going to roam, shade the nose. And I think that it improved, no. And I would even venture to say that they got worse because of the Hankins release. You want a guy who's athletic to run that. I just thought that, Hankins was as good as anybody to be able to do it. And they kind of, I think that they may have even taken a step back. It just really depends on how these guys are growing. Did anybody come in who's really going to make a difference? And some of those defensive ends, when they do kick inside, how does that affect the interior? But all in all, I'm not really excited about the defensive tackle situation until we see more about it, right? Let's go to the linebackers. Colts, I mean, a lot of what they've done is the same, okay? Jeremiah George, Antonio Morrison, Anthony Walker. They drafted Matthew Adams. They signed Tyrell Adams. Zaire Franklin was a draft. Najee Good was brought in free agency. Sky Moore. William Osai was also brought in as well. So is that linebacking core improved? I think that it is. How much is really hard to say. I mean, I think that a lot of people really like Sky Moore. They really like what he can do in the middle of the field. And as I mentioned about that middle linebacker in the Tampa 2, he's got to be able to really drop, okay? Because he's going to have a lot of responsibilities and coverage. And he's going to have to be a guy who can pick the ball off. I mean, 14, I think, interceptions throughout 4 years in college. Sky Moore is definitely a guy that people have their eye on. Matthew Adams, I think that they talked about possibly running him at Sam, if I'm not mistaken. But I think that he's gonna be a guy who's gonna get a lot of looks everywhere. The other thing that's interesting is, what is Antonio Morrison going to do? He's not impressive. Nobody's excited that he's coming back. I think he's got a real legit possibility and opportunity to hold down that Sam position because he's definitely a physical guy. He's definitely a guy who can hit. He's definitely a guy who loves the physicality. Jeremiah George, you guys all know that I like him. What's he actually offering and where? This is the thing. We don't know where a lot of these guys are playing right now. Anthony Walker, the same. I mean, he was in. It looked like they were really wanting to work him into the rotation last year. He got injured, didn't really come back. Basically, was relegated to special teams work. Very, very little snaps outside of that. Not a lot to speak of. So, linebacking core, no. I mean, we can't say that linebacking core is improved. We just can't. It's just not. There's nothing in there that we can. Now, quarterback. I mean, we're doing this for fun, right? I think that Andrew Luck vastly improves the quarterback situation. That could be, when it's all said and done, obviously the place where the Colts improve the greatest under center, most definitely with Andrew Luck's return. Running back is kind of interesting to me. A lot of guys coming back. Ferguson, Mack, Christine Michael was on the roster last year, obviously, for a little while. Turbin, same. But they got Wilkins. They got Nyheim Hines, and they've added, a little bit of pop and to this running back room. And it's kind of fun to think about how much they've gotten better. It's another thing. We don't know. It could be a great deal. Nyheim Hines could be a massive improvement from last year. If Marlon Mack can improve this year, and you've got a big guy and a small guy who can both be dynamic in open space, both can run between the tackles. Hopefully you want a guy who can pass protect. Now, I think that Wilkins is a guy who's better at the protection part of it. Hines has been a guy who's not scared to block. Mack is a guy who's really struggled. That's going to be a decision, for a later date. We can't say that. We're basically looking for the position where they've improved. Boom. There's no question about it. That is a more improved situation than it was last year because of the players that they brought in. Safety is the same. A lot of guys that we don't know about. Farley's there still. Clayton, Gathers, Green, Hooker. I mean, Martin, all these guys have been there. We don't know. Wide receiver core. This kind of makes me want to give them a little more credit. I think it's hard for me though, but look, KJ Brent's a guy who's flying under the radar. Everybody knows that I love Krishawn Hogan and think that he's going to be a special player. I really do. I think he's going to break out year if he makes the roster. But Reese Fountain, Ryan Grant, pairing him up with T.Y. Hilton, and then, looking down at Kane and what he can give you out of Clemson. Obviously, Chester Rogers is ready for a big year. Kason Williams is an exciting prospect. It's just still a lot of unknown. You can't say, I think that this wide receiver core could be really good. It could be really good. And last year's receiver core was pretty crappy. So I think that they've improved just in youth and ability and potential. But to say that they're definitely improved would be, crazy. And I think that outside of the linebacking core, adding Leonard to that mix in the linebackers, I think that it's kind of the same situation. They've got the veteran in Good there. They've got another veteran in Morrison, and they've got a second-year guy that's coming back in Anthony Walker. Sorry, spaced, but that's about it. Everything else is youth. I love the youth, but we just still, it's just one of those positions. I think that it's kind of impossible not to see that the offensive line is where they've improved the most. You get two of the most athletic offensive linemen in the draft. You place them inside of a guy who's been a stalwart at left tackle, not the best left tackle in the game, probably not even the top 5 left tackles in the game, but he is a guy who's always healthy. And you put Quentin Nelson next to him. You smash him in between Kelly and Costanzo. That left side is solid. And that's what they're doing. That's what their left side looks like. Now you look on the other side of Kelly, and you've got a competition there between Braden Smith, Jack Muhort. In my opinion, those are the two front runners for that spot. I think any way you go, that's an upgrade. And I'll tell you why. Because first, it's not Vunovich. Second of all, it sounds like Muhort's healthy as can be, right? So a healthy Muhort is a massive upgrade on an injured Muhort anyways, no matter how you look at it. Braden Smith is going to be an upgrade on anybody else that they play at either guard spot from last year. None of those guys were athletic. You see Vunovich pull. He can't even block a guy out in space. You're going to have a guy in Braden Smith who's going to require, somebody to take out. Linebacker is going to have to take him out to allow somebody else to tackle the running back when he's out there pulling for one of the, to lead block. So I think that's a massive upgrade at right guard. Then you look at right tackle. This is still a question mark, but there's a lot of moving parts here because you've got Denzel Good, Joe Haig. You've got, Tyreek Burwell, who did get some playing time last year, but you've got a guy in LaRaven Clark who I think can excel in this system. Whether he does or not, I don't know, but I think he can. Quick passing. You guys heard George Bremer talk about it the other night. A lot of what they're doing is going to be quick passes. They're going to want to get the ball out quickly to these players and let them do something in space. LaRaven Clark, believe it or not, is a really athletic guy at offensive line. I just don't know if he gets like I said the other day, I just don't think that he gets the rope. If he doesn't look great, I think they're going to probably get rid of him. I don't think they're going to have a lot of patience for him because he was kind of a guy who came on, and it was similar to Good for that, for that matter. So let's not act like he was so much better. But Good's got more versatility. So Good's going to be the guy that sticks in that regard. Raven Clark, he has to come out literally out of the corner punching, swinging for the fences, because if he comes out and has a good, whether it be OTAs or the mandatory minicamp, if he can do that, he can potentially get himself a realistic shot at that spot. If they can't move him to left tackle because he's awful at left tackle. People were saying last year when they moved him over there that he looked better at left tackle. Please go watch those games again because he looked so sloppy. He could his pass sets were not crisp. His ability to get back, his first step was weak and sloppy. His footwork was terrible over there. You could tell that he just wasn't used to it. But that's going to be something that the Colts are really going to have to try to do is figure out who's that guy falling in behind him. Now, Austin Howard, the guy that they just signed, he's kind of the de facto starter right now there. So you look left to right, Costanzo, then you go into guard and you have Quentin Nelson, then you've got Kelly, then you've got Muhort or Smith, and then you've got Austin Howard. Those in just across the line is massively upgraded from last year. Nobody's trying to say that Austin Howard is a world beater. Nobody's trying to say that Braden Smith's going to come in and kill the league, or that Jack Muhort is a guy who's going to be an all-pro this year in his first year back from, kind of being injured just constantly. Nobody's saying that. I mean, people aren't even giving Kelly, the respect, in my opinion, that he deserves for his rookie season and being a pretty good ball player last year. Not great, but not only Pro Football Focus was jerking him around. People were saying that he looked awful. He just didn't. He looked fine, but he had no help, and the guards last year were just absolute trash for most of the season. So you've got a lot of competition behind that group too, guys that are going to be really hunting for a roster spot. So I mean, without a doubt, the most improved position, and I'm just going to say group, I guess you could say, for this Indianapolis Colts team is the offensive line. This offensive line could be, one of the better ones in the division. We just don't know yet. I mean, so, I'm not trying to, talk us through the ceiling here, but we are more athletic. They are more experienced. Just the same. The two rookies, let's say two rookies start, they're still more experienced. You've got a vet on each end as a bookend, and you've got a third-year guy at center who's basically running that offensive line. And you've got all of that with two really athletic rookies smashed into this cookie, man. I mean, that's impressive. A lot of experience there, a lot of hope and potential and youth as well. And also you've got athleticism. I just think that that's a great combination for this Colts offensive line. Whether the Colts can put all that together, maintain protecting Andrew Luck, really impress in the running game, that's all yet to be seen. But just on paper, offensive line all the way. I mean, the tight end group, we didn't really go through them, and they're improved as well, but nowhere near, in my opinion, what this offensive line has been improved. So I'm definitely going, wouldn't we have to say guard if we were going specific position, right? I mean, so we're just going to say offensive line. I think the offensive line, as much as people thought that wasn't going to be a focus, and as much as the front seven, if you put all the defensive front seven in one grouping, you could probably match that. And a lot of that was the focus of Chris Ballard. So outside of all that, I think we're going offensive line with that. So let's move on a little bit. We're hoping here that in the next, probably few days, that the cornerback group possibly gets another weapon here. We're looking at Bashaud Breeland, who was a former Redskins cornerback. Really, a guy who could definitely make a big bit of difference, guys, for the Colts in their coverage. I mean, he is a guy who is always after the ball. He was injured, of course, last year. I just don't think that you can, or not, I'm sorry, not this year or last year, but, through the free agency, and people were making a big deal about that. But they said he was initially, ready to go, was going to be able to pass any physicals and all that other stuff. But then they come out and who is it? It was Rap Sheet was saying that, when he comes back and when he's full healthy, and it was just like 24 hours before that, they were saying the dude was completely healthy. But he's a physical guy. He was near 70, 80 tackles his first 3 years in the league, was in a bit of a different role last year, but had the most passes defended in his career so far. only had one interception. He had 7 in his first 3 years combined before that. So he's a guy who's going after the ball. He's a guy who's physical. And he's a guy who is going to keep reception numbers down. He would be a huge upgrade, in my opinion, to that cornerback class. And that would be a legitimate, look, a 5th-year guy, matching him with what I think Pierre Deser's a 6th-year guy, maybe 5th or 6th. And then, with a 2nd year, basically a rookie season for Quincy Wilson and some of the guys that are backing him up, that cornerback group could be pretty tough, man. Nate Harrison's a guy who's just flying under the radar like crazy. And I don't even know that those of us who are covering the Colts really give him enough credit for as impressive as he's been. But Nate Harrison is a dude, and he's a guy who's going to be interesting to watch in this summer as well, to kind of figure out what he's going to be doing. So, I mean, there's Bashaud Breeland. There's, a lot of people are talking about Dez Bryant. I personally am not a fan of Dez Bryant being, signed by the Colts. I just don't see that it's necessary. I think that they've got a lot of youth. They've got a lot of fun, speed guys with a lot of upside, and they've got the right group as far as what they deem as their prototypical size and speed. They've got a lot of that covered already. I just don't see how that benefits the Colts to bring in Dez Bryant. Does it give them 1 year of a guy who's a potential playmaker and difference maker? Yeah. But what does that really do? We're going to cut a guy like you. Are you guys willing to cut Kane to get 1 year of Dez Bryant and then have him kind of screw up that wide receiver room? I'm not. I mean, or Reese Fountain for that matter. You're going to cut him, or are you going to cut one of these other guys that are coming up, like maybe a Ryan Grant? I mean, we just enter whoever you want out of that receiver core. I don't want to cut any of them for Dez Bryant. Yes, Dez Bryant has the most high ceiling, I guess you could say, out of any of them, but it's not going to be for much. I mean, we've seen what he did last year. I'm just not in favor of it. I just don't care. I just don't want him. That's just where I'm at. Looking at some of the other positions, it's kind of hit and miss, but there were some guys that I thought would be of interest if we were to, let's say, not get Breeland. I'm not, like I said, I hope that we don't get Dez, or that I hope they don't even try for him. But I did want to bring up a couple guys who I thought were really interesting. I don't know if a lot of people know who they are, but let's look at the cornerback position while we're there with Bashaud Breeland. Kayvon Webster. Okay, Kayvon Webster was a guy. He's 27 years old, first and foremost. Picked up in Denver, 2013 draft. Had really kind of a really strong rookie year. Had an interception, 10 passes defended, 41, 42 tackles or something like that his rookie year. Everything kind of went downhill after that. I mean, they started acquiring corners. So think about this in the process. They're bringing in more corners. Roby gets drafted. I mean, their Harris is there. All these guys that they've got a really solid secondary. So, of course, he's not getting as much. But he was definitely a guy that they kept on the roster for 3 years after that. That should tell you something. He maintained on the roster 3 years after his rookie year, where he was really, one of the guys. He only started a couple games. But, I mean, he's got good length at 5'11". He's not super tall or anything like that, but he's got the aggressiveness and everything else that you want. He was able to play right corner last year for the Rams and ended up having 38 total tackles, 7 passes defended, and had another interception. So this guy has the talent. He only played and started. He started 11 games last year, and that's all he played. I would like to kick the tires on that guy. I think that's a guy who, 27, not overly old. Obviously they try to fit him into Chris Ballard's little age range here, but that's a guy that I would be willing to spend a little bit of money on. Not a bunch, but a little bit. I think that he's a guy who could really play, and I think that he would, challenge for, some guys for some positions as well. So I would be really interested in Kayvon Webster to see if they would go after him. Now, looking at inside linebacker, here's a guy who was actually, when he came out of college, they were talking about maybe he could move to safety. He's got a lot of speed, not a great coverage guy, inside linebacker, 6 foot, and only been playing a couple years. Played 2 years in Oakland. Very, very productive for no more than he starts. He's only started 14 games in his career the past 2 years, and he's already accumulated 95 tackles. I mean, that's pretty impressive, right? I mean, he's not a great dude in coverage, and I think that's probably one of his knocks, but he is fast, he can drop, and he just doesn't have a lot of you know, he's just not a guy who's gotten a lot of those opportunities, I suppose, in coverage. He's been primarily a run defender, actually improved on his tackles last year for a really terrible Oakland defense. And they kind of moved him around to outside linebacker, inside linebacker last year, but he came in the league as an inside guy. Not even 25 years old yet. So, basically, I think his birthday is actually this week. He's actually going to be, 25 here in the next couple of days. So Corey James is a guy that I think that the Colts could probably keep their eye on as well. Looking at wide receiver now, there's not, in my opinion, a lot of reason to go out for a guy who's old or a guy who's going to require a specific amount of passes, but a guy who could come in and legitimately fight for a roster spot. A guy with speed, a guy with length, not a guy like Des Bryant who's going to require everybody baby his butt. We're not going to be doing that. Dontrell Inman, kind of one of the few guys left out there that's got any production in his career at all. He's been injured a few times, that's kind of an issue, but if you bring him in specifically and holistically as a tryout basis, I think you could have something there. He's 29, not a young guy, but like I said, I mean, you want to bring back Kamar Aiken? I mean, if they're going to bring anybody in that I've seen on the free agency list, this is probably one of the guys, at least with what we can gather from production. Okay. There's some guys who have watched tape on some of the guys that none of us know their names, and that's great. And if they're good and worth it, so be it. But I mean, he's actually got some pretty solid numbers. The 1 year in San Diego, he was really impressive. 58 catches full 16 games, over 800 yards, 4 touchdowns, 14 yards a carry or a catch. And, outside of Chicago, when, that was his best of his season, he was in Chicago for 7 games, started 7 games, and was there, 14 and a half yards per catch. So that was nice. He had a touchdown there as well. 40 targets. That's pretty impressive. I mean, almost 700 yards out of just that stop. And that's about it. So Inman, maybe, right? I mean, just a guy. Bring him in if you want him to battle for a position. Not a guy that you definitely are going to say, he's a guy who should be on this roster. I don't think that's anywhere where we're at. I don't think the Colts would be, in that regard either. So just a couple guys that I think we should kind of keep our eyes on and think about as we go forward. Do the Colts not go with Breeland, but want to bring in another guy? I think Breeland's obviously the better attachment to this Colts team. He's younger, he's better, and doesn't offer the cheap side of a contract, but he's definitely a guy who could be worth it. And let's be honest, the Colts have got a ton of money to spend, so it's something that's going to be interesting to watch. So the Colts, again, their OTA schedule, May 22nd, tomorrow, Tuesday, through the 24th, May 30th through June 1st, and then June 4th through the 7th. So the Colts through their OTAs, then they go to mandatory minicamp in mid-June. And, it's going to be interesting, guys. We've got basically 4 weeks of minicamp type stuff here, and then we're going to have about 4 weeks off, 5 weeks off, probably before training camp actually kicks underway. They haven't released the actual dates for that yet. So that'll be something that's coming in the next few weeks, I would presume. But, I mean, we still got some football stuff to talk about. Let's hope that there's some interesting topics, that we can kind of dissect over the next few weeks. But this is kind of the dead time, right? This is kind of the dead time where we don't get a whole lot of information. There's not much to talk about. but we're going to do what we can with it. We'll probably put up some previews, probably go a little more in depth on a couple players or something like that. Maybe do a film room piece or two while we're here. But, aside from that, we're going to do as best we can to keep you guys informed and to put out some interesting stuff for you guys. So thank you guys all for joining me. We're going to talk to you next time right here on the Colts Cast.